I'm not gonna lie, I went into Akimbot not expecting a whole lot. It looked like a pretty blatant clone of Ratchet Clank and was coming from a fairly new developer. Couple that with some rough performance issues, and I went into this game figuring that at best it might be a passable action platformer that didn't stray too far from the tried and true formula. Oh, boy was I wrong, because Akimbot really surprised me. Yes, it is a blatant Ratchet & Clank clone, there's no getting around that. But for a second-time developer, Evil Raptor threw every idea they had at the wall to see what would stick. And let me tell you, a lot of it actually sticks. See why I'm both shocked and awed when I review Akimbot. Instead of Ratchet & Clank, Akimbot introduces us to Xe and Shipset, an unlikely pair of outlaw robots who reluctantly team up after barely surviving a daring escape from the police. Xe just wants to be left alone, but Shipset has all the skills they need to get them off the planet and escape the mob who's in hot pursuit. Through a crazy set of circumstances, the duo finds themselves stuck in the middle of a war between regular robots and dinosaur robots, with both sides hoping to get their hands on a powerful artifact that could end the conflict once and for all. It's up to Xe and Shipset to survive the battlefield and, if all goes well, bring peace back to the solar system. Of course, that's easier said than done. Akimbot is the kind of game where the outlaw heroes just can't catch a break. Xe doesn't want anything to do with any of this, yet he's stuck with a claptrap wannabe who just won't shut up and keeps getting him in deeper and deeper trouble. Every time it looks like they'll finally be able to get a win, they crash land on some new planet or get sucked through a dimensional portal. Throw in a few unexpected twists and turns, and you have yourself a pretty thrilling adventure filled with colorful robot characters that are bursting at the bolts with personality. Now let's go ahead and take a moment to state the obvious. Akimbot shares a lot in common with Ratchet & Clank. There are some differences in the characters and the world, of course, but the basic gameplay is practically identical. Xe can double jump, dash, spin around in the air, and smack the evil robot baddies around with a melee weapon. He also has a floating sidekick who gets to have his own adventures, however briefly. If you're a fan of the Ratchet & Clank series, then a lot of Akimbot is gonna look familiar. Unfortunately, when you so blatantly lift from a popular franchise, it means that we're gonna have to compare the two. And at least in one crucial way, Akimbot comes up way short. The big disappointment here is in the selection of guns, which are just nowhere near as fun as what you get in Sony's popular series. We have a choice of 4 fairly standard guns, including a sniper, a rocket launcher, and a machine gun. You don't get to turn your foes into sheep or reduce them to pixels, because this ends up taking a much more serious view of future weapons, and that's a little disappointing. Thankfully, the game's level designs are exciting enough that you'll quickly forget about the bland firepower. Although this is only the developer's sophomore release, they have clearly been studying Ratchet & Clank and 3D platformers in general. The stages are large and full of cool enemies to shoot and varied obstacles to overcome. They also have secret paths and pretty much every kind of platform that you could possibly want to jump on. Now, had this been nothing more than a fun platformer with third-person shooting, I could see myself having a good time, but ultimately being let down by the way too familiar gameplay. However, Akimbot has a lot more going on than double jumping and floating platforms. What elevates this game above being just another clone is how much variety there is in the action. This is a great example of a developer not taking the easy route and instead taking the time to break up the action with a wide variety of activities. For example, there are multiple space battles that will immediately remind you of Star Fox. There are also a bunch of racing and driving sequences scattered throughout the levels, including one involving a tank, which we'll talk about more in a minute. Oh, and did I mention that you can ride a Robo-Tyrannosaurus Rex? What, you're still not sold? Then maybe the one-on-one 2D fighting mini-game will do something for you. The point is, there are a lot of activities to do along the way. And it's not just in the ships that you fly or the dinosaurs that you ride, because there's also a lot of variety in the actual stages. A great example of this are the ice levels, which are so cold that Xe will have to dash from one fire to the next in order to stay warm and alive. This is followed by challenging timed stages that are all about running through the obstacle course as fast as possible, often ignoring all the enemies and items that litter the path. It's honestly rare for there to be a quote-unquote straightforward level, which keeps the action fresh and exciting. Look, as much as I want to commend the developers for putting in that extra work to incorporate racing missions and outer space dogfights, I can't overlook some of the game's more glaring problems. One of the big ones is the performance, which can best be described as rough. I played through the game on the PlayStation 5, and boy, it often felt like the game was being held together by nothing more than duct tape and a prayer. The frame rate is inconsistent, and the checkpoints will abruptly pause the action at some truly awful moments. There's also bad screen tearing early on in the game, and I ran into some obvious collision detection in the last act. Even the cinemas have problems keeping up with the action, as there's some weird artifact interference whenever it cuts from one character to another. Akimbot is the kind of game that feels like it probably needed a few more months of polish to get right. And I have a hunch that some of the jankiness will turn off many gamers before they get to the really good stuff. I suppose it's also worth mentioning that not all of the activities are fun. Driving the tank, for example, is an absolute nightmare. Moving the beast around is hard enough, but targeting the army of robot dinosaurs coming after you is downright frustrating. And no, it doesn't help that you're expected to drive this massive tank through a narrow passage filled with objects to get stuck on. Throw in some real tragic camera problems and you have a section that stalls the fun dead in its tracks. Thankfully, the game is able to recover from its terrible tank troubles. That said, it does eventually run out of ideas and it probably goes on an hour too long. You'll eventually come back to where you started, thinking that Akimbot is a blatant Ratchet Clank clone. Even with the variety and the missions and everything else, you're never going to be able to shake the fact that you've been here and done this all before. And no matter how much I ended up liking this game, Ratchet Clank's recent outings have been even better. That leaves us with a really good action platformer that excels at variety, but fails when it comes to originality. If you love Ratchet Clank, then you're pretty much guaranteed to enjoy Akimbot. It's the story of a pair of outlaws who get stuck in the middle of a war between robots and dinosaurs. This sets up a lengthy adventure filled with expertly crafted stages and a wide variety of activities, including everything from one-on-one brawling to racing to fighting epic battles in space. The fun is ultimately let down by a number of lingering performance issues and the feeling that you've done this all before. While not especially original, Akimbot is an absolute must for gamers who like a little gunplay in their 3D platformers. This game really surprised me. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite platformer franchise? Are you into the classics like Mario and Sonic? Or maybe you're into the slightly newer stuff like Crash, Sly, Jax, and Blinks? Might as well include Blinks. He's the time sweeper. Let's see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back next week with more reviews. And who knows, maybe next week Nintendo will finally announce more Nintendo Switch Online games. No, I'm not frustrated. Why do you ask? While you wait for that, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,